Sam, thanks for sticking around for a couple minutes to talk about
Oh,
writing.
my pleasure, Laura, anytime.
Awesome. So your transition from journalist to book author, how did that happen?
It happened because I realized that the stories I was working on for the LA Times actually merited much larger treatment. The story was nationwide. This happened with my book Dreamland, my first book. And I began to realize this is much bigger than you could really tell in a story. I would say, though, that the transition is not that stark. You know, I apply all the procedures and the rules and the practices that I learned being a crime reporter most of my life to this, and it's just doing more of it, doing it a little bit more intensely, keeping track of a variety of stories at once, when before it was just usually one story I was telling at the time. But it wasn't that hard, I have to say.
I love reading books by journalists because there's this combination of complexity, storytelling, and like you're bringing me along.
Right. That was the whole idea behind Dreamland. That's why the chapters are very short. You know, when I started, I put all the books on my table that I had dealing with heroin. Some of them I got from libraries on my own. And when I say these are books, you know, I knew something about them. None of them had sold. None of them were read. 10,000 or 15,000 copies max, you know. And so what do they all have in common? Well, long chapters. It's kind of like a medicine, take your medicine kind of book, you know. And then I asked myself, why do I love to watch certain movies like Heat? I've watched that many times. Or The Wire, another unbelievable, really one of the best TV show ever, I think. Why? Well, because the stories are gripping, the characters are fantastic, and you leave people hanging. You want to binge. That's when I love binging on that side. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. So I began to think, well, this is what the book needs to be. It needs to be a story that you can binge, right? Or at least I'm going to employ the services like Charles Dickens and other people that leave people hanging. So you're always wanting to know what happens next. And the chapters also are like TV scenes, you know, or a TV episode, 3-4 pages. That's the max, because I want people to be moved along. And that was really the process. And it's also keeping the writing clean, really going after needless words. It's the essential act in writing is doing that. Omit needless words. That's what Strunk and White said in their classic book on writing. And what I totally believe is necessary. And when you do that, omit needless paragraphs, omit needless quotes, et cetera, all that stuff, you get to a streamlined thing that is powerful and brings people along and achieves what did not happen with those other books, that as well as written as they may have been. Not passing judgment, I'm just saying I didn't want my book to be like that. And so Dreamland was like that. The Least of Us is also with that in mind, although the chapters aren't quite as short, there's still the attitude I had was always to bring people along quickly, but also based on I believe, quite rigorous research too. It's not like just shooting your mouth off. This is what this person said. This is what this study showed. You know, this is what this neuroscientist experiment displayed, that kind of thing. You bring people along and then weaves them, find the connections. How do they all connect, you know? To me, you need to make a coherent whole. We are bombarded with incoherence. This story, what does it matter? This story over here, there's thousands of these, sometimes hundreds of these a day. We don't know what they mean or how they all fit together. And if you don't do that, then all of a sudden your reaction is just to shut things down. I don't want to hear it anymore. I just want to watch Seinfeld reruns, you know? And so that was also my intention. Let's find ways to explain to the world. Explain, sometimes my audience was parents who'd lost kids or loved ones of any kind, spouses, sisters and brothers, what have you, you know. What happened in your life? How did that happen? Well, here's my best shot at explaining what I think happened.
Yeah. So in Dreamland and in The Least of Us, there are these like momentary tangents that catch my attention, like in Dreamland, like the Russian evangelicals,
yes,
where I'm like, that's a book. Or in The
Sure.
Least of Us, the father who's bringing thermoplastic videotape and chemicals from Akron to China in the 70s. Right. Like, how do you not go down every road?
Well, it's very hard. And the truth is, I think most journalists will tell you, certainly I can tell you, that it's reducing, because all these facts are your babies. You're connected to them. Oh, that's brilliant. Oh my God, I'm such a great journalist for finding that out. Oh my God, how dare I cut it? You know, that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, yeah, they're great. It's great stuff. I left lots on the cutting room floor, you can say, that I think should be in there. But you also always have to keep in mind how people read, what people want to read, how much of it they want to read, and keeping the chapters short. And so, you know, with all of my books, I've kind of taken an attack. Okay, for each chapter, I'm going to cut, I have a rough draft. For each chapter, I'm going to cut 10%. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but over a period, then you get to 10% reduced. And then after a while, you go, okay, now it's another 10%, you know. And that's when you get to really, I think, solid reading. At that point, it just propels you along. You can't stop, you know. Then when you get it down to that level, when the author has taken so much care to say, I know how you read, I know what you need to read, I know what you need to know, and we're going to strip out the rest, and so it makes it much more quick. And so I would say that my reaction I've been receiving from the book, from emails, on Facebook, or what have you, is just that. You know, I read it in 3 days. I've read it now for the second time. This is a very fast pace. It's a dour topic, but it doesn't feel that way. These kinds of things, and that is where I live. You know, that's my narcotic, really. Oh, Mike, tell me that again, please. You know, that's kind of the way it is.
Yeah. So, and things change so fast on your beat. I'm curious how you, with writing a book, how you are timely and yet able to respond to
But
the
see,
changes.
this is the point. It's very difficult. And you always have to, I was adding stuff to The Least of Us within like a month of turning it in, and then adding it after I got the copy edits back, because I have to give myself pep talks when I'm writing this up, because nothing changes faster in our economy than the underworld. It's rapid. It is so rapid. So I have to say, I can't worry about that. I'm just going to write it, but I do have to write it as quick. So I would say that there's significant part in this book that talks about the transformation of counterfeit pain pills, and how these are now in Mexico, transforming them into, you know, and that these are now being sold on Snapchat and Instagram and all the rest, right? Well, that is a relatively new thing. That's within the last year or two. And so I wanted to make sure that that was part of the book. So I added far more than the copy editor would have liked, actually. I think I added like a couple thousand words on the topic, maybe something like that, that I thought just had to be in there because it was such a big deal. It had not been a big deal when I was starting the book, and actually after about a year into it, it still was not a big deal. It was not the thing, and now it's clearly, in the last year and a half, it's become the thing on the street to be selling the stuff and also selling it on social media. So I'm always very aware of that I have to be rapid fire involved in this stuff, and I can't avoid it, you know.
Yeah. So can you talk about what's next? What your current or next project is?
Oh man, I want to take a nap. Okay, that's what I want to do. You know, there are many projects that I love. I'd love to do. One is a young adult version of a story that I heard in Mexico about how this is completely off the topic now. A story is one of my beautiful little babies that I've been working on for a long time and printed in a couple of versions, about the way they chose the first Chinese-Mexican beauty queen in Mexico, in the city of Mazatlan during Carnival. And she was chosen because they made a way of that the queen would become the person or whose family collected, literally true, the most Pepsi bottle caps, right? And it's a story also of a Chinese community that had been highly persecuted 30 years before during the Depression and all that, and a lot of forced deportations, running people out, and that kind of thing. So the Chinese community that was left was very, very quiet. Nobody ever participated in public things. And this was the first kind of coming out of the Chinese. The woman's name was Isela Wong. And she has this gorgeous story. She's died a number of years ago, but I interviewed her before she died, and she has this gorgeous story about, you know, getting money from the different Chinatowns and coming back and holding like wrestling matches, and people would pay in terms with Pepsi bottle caps. All this kind of stuff, just gorgeous, gorgeous detail, beautiful story. So I want to write a young adult, mainly for girls, story about Isela Wong, the first Chinese-Mexican beauty queen. I also have a book that I'd like to do about another weird topic, but I love it, about tubas. The tuba in the civil rights movement, and tubas have always been at the back of the band, hidden, right? But now you're seeing tubas step to the fore and be virtuoso soloists and this kind of thing. So that's another story. And then there's the story of my first book was published by the University of New Mexico Press here in Albuquerque. Wonderful press, wonderful people. So big shout out to the University of New Mexico Press. Folks I worked with back then were magnificent. My first book had on its cover a guy by the name of Chalino Sanchez. Chalino Sanchez is kind of the godfather of the narco corrido, the narco ballad, murdered in Culiacan, Sinaloa, but had lived his life here in Los Angeles. And that's a 10,000-word story. I want to write a full-length biography of Chalino Sanchez because his life intersects with all these. His life story is fascinating, but it also intersects with the rise of illegal immigration, the rise of drug trafficking, and the rise of enormous Mexican diaspora in Los Angeles that I want to write about as well. I know a lot about as well. And so those are some of the ideas, but who knows, man? I mean, there's so many. I'm interested in everything. There's nothing that doesn't interest me. Tubas, Chinese, Mexican beauty queens, drug traffickers. It's all just magnificent stuff. It's frankly, you're never going to be rich, but this kind of way of living is just so fulfilling. I'm never bored. I'm always waking up going, damn, that's a great story, man.
Well, I'm glad. I love your work, going way back to Two Tales from Another Mexico.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you, Laura. I really appreciate it.
I can't wait to read what comes next. So thanks, Sam.
Me too. Me too.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.